Today we're going to be speaking a bit about non-human and human communication. Group members are Abigail Henry and Kaylee Griffith. First of all, communication is a vital part of human life. Since the beginning of time, communications have been evolving. Whether it is speaking orally, writing letters, or through the use of technology, we still get our message across. Communication has a strong effect on individuals. It helps us express ourselves and create bonds that can last a lifetime. The way we communicate can tell a lot about a person if they're a leader or decision makers. The key part to every communication is listening and understanding. It works both ways equally for both parties. It is the way of life. In this study, we are going to find out the ways in which human and non-human interact and communicate. So first, we're going to start with non-humans. In the non-humans communication, we studied two dogs, a male and a female, to be precise, about the age of 7 and 3, a mother and a son. Every evening at 4 to 5 o'clock, for an accumulated amount of 3 days, the dogs were able to run around and be free in an open lot where these observations were made. On February the 8th, 2019, at approximately 4 p.m., the dogs were let loose and set to roam the open lot on the other side of the house. Because of being tied apart from each other, they seemed to be happy and were jumping up on each other and barking at each other, running freely in the yard. On February the 9th, 2019, I prepared myself for another observation. As before, the dogs were let out, only this time, instead of playing together, they were chasing birds and barking and jumping after them. When it came for time to be tied up again, they came and the mother fell asleep after eating. Nevertheless, she started snoring and making frantic body movements as if though she was having a nightmare. On February 10, 2019, the dogs weren't as excited to run around, and to my surprise, the male dog strayed away from his mother and went around another stray dog and started sniffing her. I'm guessing that was their mating call. However, I had to intrude. No babies were to be made on my watch. And last but not least, our final day on February the 16th, the dogs haven't been let out for a while, so they were quite excited, except for the male dog, as he quickly ran up the street to start trouble. He began barking at some other dogs, and may I add, they were bigger, but I yelled his name. After a few times yelling, like 7 times, he came running back, wagging his tail. Human communication. This study was observed for an cumulative of 4 days. The study was conducted at the University of Belize Belmopan Central Campus under the RLC area. The purpose of the study was to display the different ways in which humans communicate verbal and non-verbally. Approximately 7 persons were in the study, 4 females and 3 males, about the age of 18 to 25. Most of the time under the RLC era was very quiet and it was a humid week. Several students were studying or simply communicating with each other. Studying the human communication was quite difficult at times because you wouldn't want them to think you were eavesdropping and being disrespectful, but it was also an interesting experience. On Monday, the 11th of February, I started my study. At 2 p.m., I sat under the RLC and started to look for my first target. A female walked in and sat beside my classmate and I, and she started speaking Spanish. When she saw the confusion on my friend's face, she asked if we hablas español. I understood, so I started to converse with her, and we started talking about the Creole language and how she thinks it's cool. On Tuesday, February the 12th, was my second day. On this Tuesday, I went back under the RLC around 3 p.m., and it was quite empty to my surprise. One of my classmates came to sit with me. She started talking to me. She was complaining about a class she hated, and I knew she was quite upset because she kept rattling on and on and on, and I could barely concentrate on what she was saying, but I saw her body movements and her facial expressions. Every time she talked about that one class, her tone of voice changed. I could hear the anger in her voice very clearly. She usually has a high-pitched voice, but every time she spoke about the class, it was low and serious. If I didn't know her and saw her facial expression from afar, I would definitely know how to approach her. On Wednesday the 13th, after my second class, I went under the RLC, and my study buddy came along and we started studying. About 20 minutes after, the group of students under the other shed started dancing and singing, and a couple of students under the RLC looked at them trying to figure out what was happening. Some in disgust, or some just plain noisy, pointing in a direction to share what's happening on the other side. On the last day, February 14th, note that this was Valentine's Day, I sat at my usual spot and saw a particular girl sitting alone. Her partner was coming around the corner bringing her roses and what I guess was a box of chocolate, and they greeted each other with a hug and a quick kiss. By her facial expression, I'd suggest that she was very, very happy. What mode of communication seemed to be more predominant in the non-human group? Well, auditory or sound-based and pheromones seem to be very predominant. The dogs used barking and sounds to communicate with each other, and in the first few days they were let out, they were barking after each other, even the female dog fell asleep snoring. On one particular day, the stray dog gave off a scent that attracted the male to her, communicating that it was time to mate. What are the modes of communication that seem to be predominant in the human group? Communication has changed drastically over the years. However, the three modes of communication still remain the same. In the human group, interpersonal and interpretive seem to be more predominant. Interpersonal involves a two-way communication whereby both parties are communicating either by speaking, listening, reading, or writing, while interpretive is a one-way communication that involves only one person. A person may interpret a message or a signal from the other party. In the study, day 2 and 3 stood out to be interpersonal. This study involves more than two persons conversing with each other physically. Interpersonal communication is the most important mode of communication because it is often essential to solving problems that inevitably occur both in your private and professional lives. In the study, the participants used mainly verbal communications. The other participants understood by listening to the emotion being expressed. As shown in day 2, the participant voiced and words were not calm, so the other person listening would assume that he or she was mad. Another thing that was predominant was nonverbal communication, which involves facial expressions and hand gestures, which were also predominant in the groups. On day 2, the participants used hand gestures to signal her emotions. On day 3, the individuals sitting under RLC expression changed when they heard the singing and saw the dancing. Everyone turned their attention to the guys under the shed. Two ways of communication is only effective when the other person possesses listening skills. Interpretive communication is all about how we give meaning to someone's action with only listening, viewing, or reading a text. These were all present in all groups, but mostly in day 4. The participant who received roses and chocolates, in my view, I interpreted as she was happy because I saw her smile and laugh, but that doesn't mean that she was. Maybe she was making her emotions with a smile and that was very displeased by it. Interpretive is a very different than comprehending what is being told. Being with no vocal communication, one must be able to read between the lines. Interpretive communication is not always a good way of communicating, especially through messages, because the other party might not understand well and interpret your message wrong. On the other hand, unlike interpretive, interpersonal gets the message and understanding across smoothly. The human used a greater variety of communication behavior because they were able to converse back and forth, not only using sounds but words and signals. While for the animals, it was quite limited. I can't and don't think I will ever be able to communicate with dogs or understand barking. If a person comes around speaking Spanish, I can learn to communicate with them by either teaching my language or learning theirs, and there is always some signal or trigger words to help me understand. Characters of communication evident in both groups were displacement, learnability, reciprocity, and stimulus-boundness. Displacement is the ability to communicate about present and past, as we could see my classmate was communicating about a class that she had that she disliked. And learnability is the ability to learn new words and languages. And in the first scenario, we can see that we taught the young lady some words in Creole as she spoke to us in her language that we picked up. And reciprocity is receiving feedback or holding a conversation. And around RLC, quite all the groups that we watched were having a conversation and communicating back and forth. In stimulus boundness, the animals left the urine to mark the territory, her pheromone. The groups were communicating about territoriality, as you can see. The dogs were barking at each other. Sexual responsiveness, the female dog let off a pheromone that attracted the male dog, and the girl's partner gave her a kiss. They showed affection, and at one point under the RLC, I observed disgust when the other groups were singing and disturbing some of the other students quite. In ending, let's try to keep in mind that animals don't speak the same language we do, and they don't understand and are capable of learning, so we have to applaud them for that.